Next, I'd love to go over to Tara, who's joined. She sent in quite a few very good questions, but since you're on, Tara, I'll let you ask them yourself if you want, or I can read them for you. But Tara has a newborn at home, first time mom, and has several questions about newborns, COVID-19, and going back to work. So Tara, is your volume on? Would you like to share your questions, or would you like me to read them for you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Oh,
Hi.
great. Hi. Wonderful. Well, I guess I can, I'll read them.
Great.
So several questions, but both my husband and I will be working remotely for the foreseeable future. I don't know how much longer that'll go on, but I will be returning to work in July. The baby will be 3 months old at that point. And we've been really conservative about exposure. And so we haven't really been interacting and planning on having people come into the house and help us. So it's really just been the two of us. And we're both sort of trying to figure out how can we manage taking care of the 3-month-old infant while both of us are working from home full time, and if there's any strategies to share the load of the housework and the baby for two people, and we have to manage our calendars and video calls. And then part of that is also, managing interruptions with having Zoom meetings and conference calls. Has anyone experienced, their bosses, has everyone been forgiving about these kinds of interruptions? Because I can only imagine you're in an important meeting and you have to step away. You just all of a sudden you have to go. Like there's nothing else you can do. You have to step away and take care of the baby. And then the other question is about finding childcare when the time does come. It's because it's uncertain about when our official return date is. It's really hard to secure help in advance. And to start that process of trying to identify someone who we feel has, been safely quarantining or wearing masks or just, whatever the appropriate protocol is there for each family. I had 2 more questions. One more was about making sure the baby's getting enough attention to meet developmental milestones while we're both working from home. And then my final question was about what's the ideal home office setup for 2 parents who are going to be working from home? Like, should we be sharing a room and having 2 desks and 2 chairs and computers and stuff kind of set up in their officing together? Or should we plan to set up like in separate areas and then pass the baby back and forth between us? We're new at this. Sounds like everybody else is new at this. So.
Yeah, so let's kind of work it a little bit backwards, so that way I can make sure that I can hit questions that are differentiated a little bit from other questions. So when you're looking for childcare, when you're heading back to work right now during this pandemic, it is tricky, but not impossible. Have you thought about the type of childcare that you're looking for? Do you want to do daycare or nanny or?
I think we would feel most secure with a nanny at this point, because then it's just one person. But even that it's just so anxiety inducing, trying to think about who would we invite into the house when we haven't really even had our extended family in the house.
Right, it is complicated. Something that a couple suggestions that I would have on finding a nanny would be using a nanny agency. So that way they would screen a lot of potential clients and you would only be in contact with a limited amount of those nannies. And then you could do virtual calls with them to try to find the one that's going to fit best with your family and your family's needs. You have nanny agencies in your area?
Yeah, we're in a major city. So yeah, I know that we can go through them. Do you know approximately how long that process takes?
It varies, especially if you're in a big city. So it might be something that you want to get on to right away. I think that would be the easiest way to go about finding a nanny with the least amount of contact, like person-to-person contact, and then writing a really good list of all the characteristics that you're looking for. Just be very detailed, so that way they can really weed out the people that you don't need to meet, and then start on Zoom, interview them a couple different times of the day, ask if you can give them calls during the day so you can kind of check in and see what's going on in their life and what kind of person they are and sort of get a feel for them. And then when you're comfortable and then the pandemic calms down, maybe select a few of those nannies that you've stayed in contact with, unless you find that you meet one that you absolutely fall in love with. And then there's a few things that you could do to hold her space. You could start paying her to be kind of on call for you when you're ready to go back to work.
Yeah.
Or you just put her on like a payroll. So you could either do like a set amount, like I will give you this amount to be our nanny. Or if you really, really like her, then you could just put her on your payroll right away, and then you'd have her secured.
Got it. Yeah, that's the only way to secure someone in
one
advance.
or the other. So she'd kind of be on call, like on hold, or just paying her week to week like you would if she was in your home already. It just depends on how much you love her and want her to be your nanny.
Got it. Okay.
Tara, I have a great set of questions that has been done by the Kunik community on questions to ask nannies for interview questions and questions to ask their references. So I can share that with everybody on this call and with you afterwards too.
That would be wonderful. Thanks so much.
No problem.
Yeah. And then as far as managing your schedules and your husband's schedules, depending on your parenting style and what your life needs right now, and it doesn't have to stick. Like if you're very attachment parenting, follow baby's lead, but you are in a pandemic and you need to survive, a schedule might be helpful for just temporarily. It doesn't mean that it needs to change your parenting style altogether and now you're a super scheduled parent. Just temporarily using it as like a crutch to get through your life would be helpful. And how you could work that is the same as I was telling Danielle, like hour and a half up from the time that they wake up from sleep, and then an hour and a half down, so that your day becomes more predictable. And you and your partner can work together. I'll handle, from 9 to 1, and then you handle from 1 to 5. So that way you're only having to really parent during chunks. And you know that there's an hour and a half. You'll have 2 different hour and a half cycles where you'll be able to do work. And then your hour and a half that you're working with baby is when you can work on the developmental milestones and giving your baby the attention that they need. It'll just be like your mom and baby or dad and baby time to work on whatever baby skills and give the baby attention that you need. But knowing that in an hour and a half, you'll be able to get back to work for an hour and a half, scheduling your calls and doing your set work. Having set split spaces with your husband or your partner might be easier. That way, if you are sharing baby care, your time at work is your time at work, and just setting really firm boundaries with one another, saying that when you're on baby care, you're on baby care, and when you're on work, really understanding and respecting those boundaries for each other, I think could be really helpful. As far as like keeping up with the house is another like tricky component right now when you're trying to work and care for babies and not having a lot of household help. Setting up really good systems and putting those systems in place and letting one another know that this is what the system is, so that you're both following that system. So whether you're an everyday laundry person, maybe have one person on laundry and one person on dishes, or if you're a once a week laundry person, setting up systems like we're gonna have a bin for the darks and the lights, and make sure that each one of you are responsible for putting your darks and your lights in. That way you know the systems and you're able to follow through with those, and just kind of set up like chores. Like these are your chores and these are my chores. These are your work time and my work time. It'll create a happier, well-balanced relationship and time during this pandemic when you have to work so closely together.
Yeah, that's I'm glad to hear actually about the split spaces. We were kind of debating about, what really is better. I mean, it seems like instinctual that the split spaces would be best, but we were thinking, well, what if, I don't know. We were just trying to envision.
Really nice for everybody to be in like one little room together, working together, but now baby's interrupting not just one
Two
person's
people.
work, but both people's work. And then those people are interrupting each other.
Yeah.
It's also just really hard to do calls and Zoom. Like my husband and I'm currently in our bedroom facing the closet, so you don't all see my bed. But that's the only place we can go and close the door because of the layout of our house where our office is in the same place. And so when one of us has a call, the other day I was in here and my husband was in the car taking a call. So I think having the separate spaces can also be really helpful for your coworkers too, just because then they don't have as much background noise. I mean, not that everybody is being very understanding. To your earlier question, I think we've seen people be quite understanding about background noise, whether it's dogs, kids, what have you. But the more you can minimize that, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah, and I think wearing earphones too, because that way the others can't hear your background noise. So even if your baby's crying and you're like shushing your baby and soothing your baby, it's not going to interrupt the call for anybody else. And I think it might make bosses a little bit happier too than just letting all the noise fly in your house.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Because I'm not doing that right now when I'm in the nursery. So.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit easier. And you can get like the earbuds that don't have the cords that might make it a little bit easier for baby care as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Tara, one of your questions I just wanted to make sure we touched on that you asked about how helpful people or understanding people are during interruptions. And that's something that in the Kunik community with working parents, we've talked a lot about. And I, just to give you what I know from all the working parents we talk with, it's really across the board. And I would say some teams and some managers have been much more understanding than other people's experiences. But one consistent thing I have found talking to all these parents is that the more upfront in communication you can be with your manager and your team, the better. So if you are going to be, nursing or pumping because you're increasing supply, trying to freeze milk, whatever it is you're doing, if you can block those times on your calendar, it helps. If you can say, hey, I'm happy to get on a call during this time, but just so you know, this is during an awake time and I might be called out, that helps. As much communication and forward, warnings and conversations that you can have with people, the better it is. And I will also say, when you go back to work, and this is something that, we're going to get into a little bit later on this call, is it's a weird thing because you're going back to work, but you're still at home. And we understand that that's incredibly strange right now. And so I think the more that you can talk to your manager, it could be, I don't know your particular case, but it could be that you're the only person on your team who's going through this right now. So your manager might be pretty unaware of the challenges that you're facing. So I would highly recommend setting up a time to talk with your manager before you get back, the first week you're back, and then having a check-in 10 days, 2 weeks later with your manager again and saying, hey, here's what's working for me and here's what's really not working for me at all. Because I think people genuinely, they want you to succeed. You work at that company, they want you to do well, but you also need to let them know what's going on for you in order for them to support you through this.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's a fine line because I don't want to emphasize too many challenges because I also don't really want them to say, oh, we'll just come back into the office in person.
Right.
It's definitely a fine line right now. I'm sure everyone's feeling that stress.
It's a fine line, and it's also changing all the time too, right? As certain things open up or don't open up, it's constantly changing. And that's, one that you'll have to at some level adjust to based on your individual needs. But I do think, as open as you can be on that fine line, the better it will be for you and for your team.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.